I believe that most men find out that their wife is having an affair by coming home at an inopportune time, overhearing an indiscreet conversation, or finding physical evidence. It was much easier for me. My wife sent me an email. In fact, Anne did not write to me intentionally, although Freudians might say otherwise. I'm guessing her email program automatically suggested my name as the intended recipient and she clicked on it without checking. This is certainly easy to do, especially if you are in a hurry. Anyway, I was stunned to receive a note from my wife, after 18 years of marriage, entitled, "About Yesterday." Since yesterday was a fairly normal Wednesday, I wondered why Anne emailed me about it. When I opened the message, I read, "Darling, I just wanted to tell you again how wonderful yesterday was. You made me feel something I haven't felt in years. I just can't wait until next week, your sexy lady." I was at work all day Wednesday, and as far as I knew, Anne was too. We didn't even talk on the phone that day, although I remember that she was unusually cheerful when she returned home in the evening. Besides, I have never said endearing words to her like sexy lady. The disgusting betrayal was obvious, and my first thought was to meet her in the evening and demand an explanation, or, more likely, a confession. But I am a logical and methodical person. It didn't take much imagination to imagine that she might deny the letter's meaning, come up with some alternative explanation, or simply pass it off as a joke. What could I say then? In addition, my unfounded accusations would have alerted her, and most likely I would not have found out anything. After thinking, I decided to wait. First of all, it would be interesting, even funny, to see if Anne realized her mistake and decided to explain herself to me. If not, then I have already been warned and can use the information correctly about her next date. Anne sells real estate, so her whores tend to be irregular. This evening she returned home much later than me. I watched her closely, but found her behavior absolutely normal in every respect. If she knew that the letter was sent by mistake, she did not show it. I, in turn, did not even hint that something was wrong. The whole evening passed in a routine, but when we went to bed, I felt that sleep was not coming. Instead, I lay there, analyzing my problem from every angle to see if I could untangle the knot. There remained, of course, the possibility that there was a completely innocent explanation for this. If that were the case, not only would I be making a fool of myself by acting rashly, but I would also be damaging our marriage. I loved my wife, and the last thing I wanted was to do anything that would drive her away from me. Well, if the letter really indicated that the affair was continuing, then my marriage was already at risk. And in this case, I would have to take action. Just because I try to control my emotions doesn't mean I don't have them. While I was tossing and turning in bed, the pain of my wife's possible betrayal ate deep into me. After much thought, I have come to the conclusion that my only option is to defer this issue until I can obtain more accurate information. Fortunately, I could do this, and once I realized this, I soon fell asleep. The next morning, when I arrived at work, I returned to analyzing the problem. The coming Wednesday should provide some answers, so I contacted a detective agency and arranged for my wife to be followed. If she doesn't do anything out of the ordinary on Wednesday, it won't exactly ease my fears, but it will definitely make me feel better. However, if my fears are justified, then at least I will know the truth and begin to take appropriate action. Having done everything I could do at that moment, I put it aside and went back to work. Apparently, the next Wednesday was no different from any other. Anne and I went to work as usual and returned home late in the evening at almost the same time. There was nothing in her appearance or behavior that struck me as abnormal or unusual. I sat in my study reading my favorite collection of Edgar Allan Poe's stories and tried my best to hide any signs of anxiety or suspicion. On Thursday morning, I had an appointment with the detective agency to find out the results of their surveillance. Although I am not a very emotional person, I can still read emotions in others. When I entered the office, the detective working my case avoided meeting my gaze. I knew right away that I wasn't going to like what he was going to tell me. Everything was just as I feared. The wife left the real estate agency where she works, and the detective followed her to a cheap motel near the airport. He handed me photographs of her meeting a man there and entering the room with him. The timestamp on the photo read 1:52 p.m. About 2 hours later, another photo showed them leaving the room together, holding hands. "I'm very sorry," the detective told me. "It is always very unpleasant for us to confirm your suspicions. What would you like us to do for you now?" I thought for a minute. "I need your help again. It appears that this motel is their regular rendezvous spot. If this is true, is there any way to take photos of what's going on in the room?" The detective didn't hesitate. "We have extensive experience in obtaining such evidence. You will probably have to pay for the motel manager's cooperation, but if it is acceptable to you, I think we can guarantee compliance." I nodded. "Evidence will be paid." I returned to my office, but this time, to my surprise, I found that I could not concentrate on my work. Now that all doubts were removed, my ability to think seemed to disappear. Eventually, I gave up trying to work and focused on what I had learned. Wiping my eyes, I began to make plans. In addition to confirming my wife's infidelity, I realized why Anne accidentally sent that treacherous letter to me instead of him. It turned out that I knew her lover. It was our neighbor, Mark Bradshaw. Since my name is Mac Bishop, the email program must have suggested my name after Anne typed the first 2 letters. It's very careless of her not to double-check, I thought, but probably emotions tend to distract lovers. Knowing the identity of Anne's lover further intensified my sense of betrayal. Mark and his wife Bobby were our friends. We often dined at each other's houses or went to the movies together, and I never noticed much of a spark between Anne and Mark. Was I blind, or were they both skilled in the art of deception? Regardless, I knew I had to do something. The question was what exactly? For several hours, I mentally went through various options for action. At times, revenge fantasies flashed through my head, followed by scenarios in which I imagined myself begging Anne not to leave. Questions about why the affair began and how long it lasted tormented me. Anger and self-pity intertwined within me. Finally, I made up my mind. Not only did I know what I wanted to achieve, but I also had a pretty good plan for achieving my goals. My campaign will involve 2 separate courses of action that will take place simultaneously. I thought of them as divide and conquer, separate 2 lovers and win her heart again. As a dividing part of my plan, I will use my knowledge of Anne and to some extent Mark to drive a wedge between them. With luck, I can stop their relationship until they decide to break up. The second part will involve an all-out campaign to win back Anne's love by becoming the perfect husband. At the same time that I showed her the downside of her relationship with Mark, I hoped to demonstrate the benefits of getting back together with me. I made extensive notes to myself, listing possible actions for each part of my campaign, planning out their timing, and working out the interdependency so that each would complement the other. When I finished, I saw that the essential element for both was the need to keep them ignorant of my knowledge of their relationship. Obviously, this would require restraint on my part, but I felt I could do it. I know how not to show emotions. I decided not to start my campaign until I received another report from the detective agency. But there were steps I could take during this time to prepare. First, I bought a recording system for our home phones, as well as a voice-activated recording device that I hid in Anne's car. Tapping our home phone closed that line of communication, and although I couldn't tap her cell phone, I felt that the car was the most likely place for her to call Mark. I wasn't worried about her calling him from work. The agency had an open-plan office, so I reasoned that she was unlikely to have a conversation with her lover in a place where she could so easily be overheard. My next step was to get into Anne's email. The home computer was already set up to access her work email. Her password protected her system, but I knew where she kept her list of passwords and it didn't take me long to gain access. I quickly arranged for copies of all messages to be forwarded to my address. Once I had access to the email, I soon learned that their affair apparently only lasted a month or so. This suggested that their relationship was still in the honeymoon stage. My goal was to end this honeymoon as quickly as possible. Having completed the preliminary work, I could only wait for the detective agency to prepare photographs of their next meeting. In addition to the photos, they surprised me with video and audio. It was an unpleasant surprise. Having gathered my courage, I began to watch them having sex. What I didn't expect was the display of affection and, dare I say it, love between them. The depth of their intimacy was painful. This made me wonder if my plan had any real chance of success. But in the end, I have nothing to lose. I will continue with what I planned. My wife is not very patient and does not handle disappointment well. I hope to use this weakness against her to disrupt the relationship she had formed with Mark. At the same time, she is very romantic, and I felt that this could be a path for another part of my plan. Having a copy of all her letters gave me a distinct advantage when it came to planning my intervention program. Their next exchange of letters gave me everything I needed to begin to separate the first part of my plan. Are we still on Wednesday? Anne. Absolutely. One time, one place. Cannot wait. Mark. On the day of their next date, I drove to Anne's office, parking around the corner so I wouldn't be seen. As soon as she returned from lunch and went inside, I casually walked past her parking lot, looked around again to make sure no one was there, and then ducked next to the car. It only took me a minute to unscrew the valve cap on the tire and let the air out. Then I returned to my car and drove back to my place. I wondered what she would do without men in the office. Sure enough, 20 minutes before she was supposed to meet Mark at the motel, Anne called me. "Can you help me?" "Don't worry about anything, baby," I said soothingly. "Work today is quite easy, so I can fix your car. I just need to finish one thing here, and then I'll be right over." Of course, I waited another 15 minutes before leaving, which meant that I wouldn't make it to her agency until nearly the scheduled time of Anne's meeting with Mark. She waited impatiently by her car. "Sorry it's so late," I apologized. It took longer than I expected. While she paced back and forth in frustration, I slowly and methodically changed her tire. I parked my car right behind her so I could load her flat tire into the trunk and take her to get it repaired. Of course, this also prevented her from leaving until I was done. By the time I put the spare tire on, put the flat tire in the car, and returned from washing my hands, it had already been over an hour since she was supposed to meet Mark. I apologized to her again for being late and said I hoped it wouldn't affect her relationship with the client. "He just has to understand," she said resignedly. "Sometimes it happens." While I was changing her tire, I heard her mobile ringing several times. But although she checked it, she did not speak. She probably saw that Mark was calling and didn't want to talk to him in my presence. My suspicions were later confirmed when I returned to my office and saw the excited correspondence between them. "Where are you? I waited at the motel for over an hour." Mark. "Crap, the car has a flat tire." Anne. "You could have at least called and let me know. I rented a room." Mark. "Mac was here changing a tire. I couldn't talk to you in his presence." Okay, I thought. Looks like I put some strain on their plans. That evening after dinner, I took Anne to the sofa where I placed her feet on my lap and gave her a foot massage. She looked at me questioningly, because she usually has to ask me for this. "I know you had a hard day, baby, and I just wanted to do something nice for you," I told her. She looked at me to see if I was hinting at something else, but as I continued to smile and work on her legs, Anne relaxed on the couch. I soon saw a look of pleasure on his face, and as I continued the massage, the soft moans of pleasure were sweet music to my ears. Not wanting to be intrusive, I waited the rest of the week before taking the next step, and on Monday, a large flower arrangement was delivered to her office with a card that read, "To the best wife a man could have." If she felt remorse because of my irony, she hid it well. But that evening, when she returned home, she thanked me profusely and told me what an impression it had made on the other women in the office. "But on what occasion?" she asked. "You've never done anything like this before." "Exactly true, darling," I said, hugging her, "and that's what I want to change." What if you got a flat tire while driving on the highway? It made me think about how precious your love is to me, and I wanted to make sure you knew that. She looked at me searchingly, but after a moment of hesitation, she hugged me and held me tightly to her. That's so kind of you, dear. It really means a lot to me. I couldn't help but wonder if she felt guilty. From her email, I learned that the lovers are planning to catch up at a special meeting in a few days. I wanted to ruin their plans, but this time I felt it might be suspicious if I messed up Anne's car again. So I let her go to the meeting place without interference, but I followed her, keeping my distance so as not to be noticed. While she was walking into the room Mark had reserved, I drove behind the motel and entered through the side door. The motel was modest enough that there were no security cameras to capture me pulling the fire alarm in the hallway. I waited outside until I saw the guests being herded to safety in the parking lot. I didn't see Anne or Mark, but I knew they must be in the crowd, probably pissed off like wet chickens. Back in the safety of my office, I watched with glee as emails flew between two frustrated lovers. Anne: "What nonsense! I'm so angry I could scream." Mark: "I'm very sorry, but it's not my fault." Anne: "Next time, order someplace that isn't a fire trap." Yes, this looks like my Anne, I thought. When she returned from work, I saw that she was still fuming. But her nervousness turned to surprise when she noticed that the dining table was set with linen napkins and our fine china. And when she smelled her favorite dish simmering on the stove, she looked at me in mock disbelief. "Who are you? And what did you do with my husband?" she asked with a wide smile on her face. "Nothing special," I answered modestly. "I called your office this afternoon, and when they told me you had a meeting with a client that was running late, I decided the last thing you wanted to do was cook when you got home." Fear flashed across her face, but she quickly came to her senses and hugged me around the neck. "That's so kind of you, dear," she said. "You treat me so well." After dinner, I was determined not to let her help with the dishes. She looked at me gratefully as I walked her into the office and turned on my favorite TV show. As I walked back into the kitchen, I felt her eyes following me and decided that the conquest part of my campaign was going well. Whatever doubts Anne may have had about her affair, the next letter I intercepted from Mark made it clear that he would not be deterred by any temporary setbacks. Mark: "Okay, no more cheap motels, sexy lady. This time I booked a room at the Hyatt Hotel. We can finally spend time together." Anne: "This is much better. See you there at the usual time." Reading their email exchanges, I cursed Mark's persistence and regretted that Anne was willing to continue their interlude. Other measures were required. I waited until noon, the day before they were supposed to meet, and then called the Hyatt Hotel reservations office. "This is Mark Bradshaw. I have a room booked for tomorrow, but something happened, and I won't be able to make it. I'm afraid I'll have to cancel the order." "No problem, sir," the employee replied. "In fact, we have a big conference planned, and your cancellation will help us a lot." I smiled with satisfaction. Having done the deed, I still couldn't resist showing up at the Hyatt just to see what would happen. I sat down in a chair overlooking the reception desk and hid behind a newspaper. And sure enough, just in time, the married duo appeared, walking hand in hand, chatting and cooing like doves. Their loving mood didn't last long once they found out that they didn't have a room. "But I ordered a number a few days ago," Mark shouted to the perplexed clerk. "I'm terribly sorry." The poor girl apologized. "But, judging by my computer, your order was canceled." "This is funny," Mark snorted. "Very good. Make us a new order." The girl shook her head sadly. "Sorry, sir, but the hotel is completely occupied, and unfortunately, due to the convention in town, most of the other major hotels are also sold out. But you might have better luck at one of the smaller motels near the airport." When Anne heard the last remark, her face turned red and she clenched her fists. While Mark continued to rage at the counter, she angrily tugged at his sleeve. "Don't pay attention," she hissed loudly. "Let's get out of here." I'm still not in the mood. With that, she turned and walked toward the parking lot, with Mark following behind her, trying to calm her down and giving her options. It was clear that he wasn't having much luck. I waited until they both left in their cars before leaving my post in the lobby. My work here is finished, I thought joyfully. When Anne returned home that evening, I stopped her at the door. "Don't even bother going into the house. We're leaving." Before she could protest, I took her hand and led her to my car. Holding the door for her, I walked around the car and got behind the wheel. "What does all of this mean?" she asked. "Where are we going?" "I decided that I would have a little surprise for you tonight," I told her with a smile. With these words, I turned on the radio in the car to some quiet music and continued driving in silence. She watched me with curiosity, trying to guess what I had prepared. She looked visibly alarmed when she saw me pull into the Hyatt parking lot. "Why are we coming here?" she asked nervously. "You'll see," I winked. Entering the hotel elevator, I pressed the button for the top floor, and soon we found ourselves in the rooftop restaurant of the Hyatt Hotel with its signature rotating dome. I approached the head waiter and told him my name. "Ah, here you are just in time," he said. With that, he led us to a table on the outer edge where we could admire the city lights. "Why did you choose this particular place?" Anne asked suspiciously. "No particular reason. I just thought it would be a wonderful setting for my pretty wife." She smiled tensely at my compliment. "But how did you manage to get us a table?" "I heard there's a big convention in town today." "Oh, that's no problem," I said casually. I called today and booked a table. Anne didn't respond to my remark, but I knew that my success stood in stark contrast to Mark's failure. In fact, I booked a table as soon as I heard about their plans for the rendezvous. "I took the liberty of placing an order," I continued. "I hope you don't mind?" She said she was grateful for my concern and relaxed. She was even more delighted when the waiter brought an ice bucket and a bottle of champagne. After we drank a few toasts, which I made for her, she really cheered up. And when the waiter brought oysters on the half-shell, she was delighted. I'm not a big fan of oysters, but Anne loves them. For the main course, the waiter brought salmon niçoise salad with black olive sauce. This made a proper impression on Anne. "I thought you would order something heavy like a big steak," she said with a smile. "This is an ideal option." "I know you love salads, baby," I told her. "Besides, we don't want to get too full." She looked at me questioningly, but I didn't say anything else. For dessert, the waiter brought 2 bowls of fresh raspberries with a dollop of whipped cream and liqueur glasses filled with Grand Marnier. It was the perfect ending, and Anne loved it all. As we drove home, Anne unbuckled her seatbelt and leaned close to me. It turned out that alcohol and oysters had the desired effect. Also, I felt that she must be upset and excited after the failures of her last dates. When I got home, I took her straight up the stairs to our bedroom. "Why don't you change into your nightgown?" I suggested, "while I do other things." As she turned to the closet, I rushed down the hall to the guest bedroom to make sure everything was ready. When I returned, I was pleased to see that she had chosen a sheer black nightie that both hid and revealed the curves of her body. I led her down the hall to the guest bedroom where scented candles were now burning, placed around the open bed. While she stood there looking in amazement at my preparations, I walked up behind her and placed the sleep mask over her eyes. "Touch and smell will be the only senses you need today," I said, leading to the bed and undressing. Then I laid her down on a fresh linen sheet. "Smell it," I said, waving the bottle of almond oil under her nose. I then poured some water into my hands to warm her up and started rubbing her feet. She moaned with pleasure as I gave her a short foot massage, but this time I didn't stop there. Soon I began to move upward, paying attention to the muscles of my calves and thighs to make sure she was completely relaxed. Moving on, I avoided her breasts, working on her shoulders and arms instead. When I got to her toes, I carefully rolled her onto her stomach and repeated the same process up the back of her legs. I firmly, but not painfully, massaged the muscles of her buttocks and back until she moaned with pleasure again. I turned her over again, and this time I started working on her breasts, circling around the breasts and gently manipulating them, but not touching the sensitive areas. After a few minutes of this massage, I slipped back to my feet and began to slightly move my hands up. Bend her knees, I ran my fingertips from her kneecaps down her inner thighs. Her moans turned into a long, drawn-out scream, echoed by my own grunts, until we both exploded and collapsed. Having come to my senses, I pulled the mask off her face. Her eyes were closed. She either lost consciousness or collapsed from exhaustion. Taking a deep breath, I picked her up, carried her into the bedroom, and laid her on the bed. Then I covered her with a sheet, and she quickly fell asleep. I gave myself a quick sponge bath in the sink before returning to bed. As I fell asleep, I was very pleased with how the evening had gone. Anne and I usually have different schedules when we get up for work, but the next morning she got up early. When I went downstairs, I found that she had already prepared coffee and breakfast for me. When I looked at her, her eyes sparkled. "Thanks, Bobby. Last night was really something special for me," she said passionately. "I'm so glad you liked it," I replied. "I know that I will remember this for a long, long time." She smiled at me. I felt like Anne and I were making real progress, but later that day I intercepted an email that let me know that Mark was still trying to meet with her. Mark: "I'm very sorry about what happened at the Hyatt yesterday. I still don't know how they managed to lose my reservation." Anne: "I don't know, Mark. Maybe it just wasn't meant to be." Mark: "Don't say that, sexy lady. Let me make amends. Is there any chance you can leave on Saturday? Bobby is leaving town and we could spend the day at our lake house. No booking confusion, no fire alarms. Just lots of love." Anne: "Mac always plays golf on Saturdays. I can probably leave while he's there." Mark: "Great. I can't wait to touch your hot body again." It was clear to me that my campaign had reached a turning point. I felt like both divide and conquer were gaining momentum. But I needed to do something this weekend, or I would lose everything I had achieved so far. Their new plans presented a real problem for me. There's no way I can cancel my golf game. Anne can always pretend to go shopping or find some other excuse to leave. I didn't dare touch her car again. All could be lost if she suspected me. And unlike the motel and hotel, I had a hard time playing with Mark's lake house. I needed some way to get Anne to change her plans, preferably at the last minute. Suddenly, the stroke of genius, the perfect solution, struck me. Moreover, the preparation took just one phone call. I followed my usual routine for the rest of the week, but on Friday evening, I sneakily grabbed Anne's cell phone and replaced the battery with a dead one. If she tries to call Mark this weekend, it will be through her home phone so I can listen in on the conversation. On weekends, Anne and I dress pretty casually, but when Anne came downstairs on Saturday morning, I noted with interest that she was wearing a beautiful skirt and blouse. I idly wondered what kind of underwear she might be wearing underneath. As my departure time for the golf course approached, I noticed Anne watching me with some apprehension, probably because I had made no move to put on my usual golf pants and shirt. When the usual time of 10 a.m. came around and I had no intention of leaving, you could see the wheels turning in her head, preparing an excuse for why she would need to leave. Finally, she became so impatient that she said to me, "Aren't you playing golf today?" she demanded. And then the doorbell rang. Anne looked at me puzzled and went to see who it was. Opening the door, she exclaimed in surprise, "Miriam, what are you doing here?" "Is this how you greet your little sister?" Miriam asked, entering the door. The women hugged each other excitedly. "Of course I'm glad to see you," Anne muttered. "I just wasn't expecting you." Miriam smiled at me. "I'm here because your wonderful husband invited me. He called me at the beginning of the week to let me know you didn't have any plans and suggested we spend the weekend together. We haven't seen each other for so long that I jumped at the chance. Anne and Miriam were very close to each other. Not a week went by that they didn't talk on the phone. But because Miriam lived 200 miles away, they did not visit each other often. "It's wonderful that you're here," Anne told her. Then she turned to me. "This is really very cool, Mac. Now I know why you don't play golf." "Well, nothing is more important than giving my wife the opportunity to spend some quality time with her sister," I told them. "Now, lady, I want you to get ready, because I'm inviting you to breakfast." Then I looked at them again. "Actually, Miriam, you might want to change into something dressier than your jeans, but you look great the way you are dressed now." Anne looked at herself and blushed, remembering why she had dressed like that, but she quickly recovered. "Why don't you help Miriam take her bag to the guest room? While she's changing, I'll just make a quick call." I watched her walk down the corridor, and a minute later I heard muffled curses. She walked out, holding her unresponsive mobile phone. "The damned battery is dead," she said angrily. "Oh dear, this is very bad." I sympathized. "But you can call your home phone. Don't pay attention," she said hastily. "In any case, the call is not so important. Now where are we going to have breakfast?" I spent the rest of the weekend working with my sisters, trying to make them feel good. When Miriam got ready to leave on Sunday afternoon, she gave me a special hug and thanked me. "You have a special husband," she told Anne. "Take good care of him." I thought Anne winced a little, but then she smiled and hugged me. "Definitely," she promised. I was sure that Anne had found time on the weekend to call Mark, but I wasn't worried. If the call was made on our home phone, I have a recording. After Anna went to bed Sunday night, I was able to check the recording device. Of course, the call came early on Sunday morning. "Anne." "Mark, it's me, Anne." "Mark, where the hell have you been? You didn't show up on Saturday, and every time I tried to call you, your phone went straight to voicemail." "Anne, I'm very sorry, but I couldn't help it. My sister came into town unexpectedly on Saturday morning, and my phone was dead. I haven't had a chance to talk to you until now." "Mark, couldn't you leave on Saturday afternoon?" "Anne, I couldn't, Mark. Mac took us all over town on Saturday." "Mark, what about today?" "Anne, my sister came for the weekend. I just can't leave her. We haven't seen each other for several months." "Mark, well, I feel damn stupid sitting at a lake house all day waiting for you." "Anne, do you never think about anything other than sex?" "Mark, okay, I think it's clear how important I am to you." "Anne, let's not quarrel about this. Listen, I have to go. I don't want Mac to take me by surprise." Their conversation delighted me. Their frustration seemed about to boil over, and I felt like I had dealt their relationship a serious blow. One could hope that this would be enough. After listening to their emails on Monday, I found confirmation of my assessment. "Mark, are we still going to meet this week?" "Anne, I don't think so, Mark. It's all becoming too much of a hassle, and it's starting to annoy me. Besides, Mac has been really nice to me lately, and I feel pretty guilty about running around behind his back. I think we need to end this." "Mark, don't say that, Anne. At least one more time." "Anne, no, I'm serious. Everything is over." "Mark, well, I can't say that I'm not disappointed. You're still a sexy lady, but I understand what you're saying. Maybe this is for the best. I don't want to lose Bobby either, but I hope we can still be friends." "Anne, of course, we will remain friends, just not friends with benefits." Success. I managed to introduce enough problems into their relationship that it collapsed. Now all I had to do was complete the second part of my plan. When Anne returned home in the evening, she was gloomy and absent-minded. Once or twice, I even thought I saw tears in her eyes. I didn't want to interfere, but I felt I shouldn't completely ignore her behavior. "Are you okay, baby?" I asked carefully. "You seem to be in a bad mood today. Do you have problems at work?" "It's okay," she said, without looking at me. "I guess I'm just in a bad mood. Maybe it's hormones or something like that." I nodded and gave her some time to compose herself, but in my heart, I was gloating, because I was sure she was mourning the end of her relationship with Mark. Even though it was her decision to end the affair, I knew that Anne puts a lot of emotion into any relationship and cannot end it without some sense of loss. For me, I found her mood reassuring. She wouldn't feel so sad if she hadn't decided to end it. But I couldn't help but think that Mark was unlikely to have a similar reaction. "He's probably having sex with Bobby right now," I thought sarcastically. The next morning, Anne was in a much better emotional state. During the day, I saw no more letters between Mark and her, which strengthened my confidence that neither of them had changed their minds. This gave me a growing sense of triumph. Everything was going as I had planned. That evening after dinner, when Anne came into the study, I again had a book of Edgar Allan Poe on my lap. "What are you reading this time?" she asked. "One of my favorites," I told her. The cask of Amontillado. I don't know that, she said. Then she pressed herself against me. Can I interrupt you for a moment? I just wanted you to know what a wonderful husband you are, she said seriously, looking into my eyes. You've been so sweet to me these past few weeks, and I feel so lucky to have you. My heart soared at these words, and I realized that I had won. This is exactly the moment I was waiting for. I looked at her, waiting to see what else she would say. She fell silent, and for a moment I saw an expression similar to guilt flash across her face. Her eyes seemed to moisten a little. I really don't deserve you, she said hotly. No, I said calmly. I don't deserve you. Then he reached for the desk drawer. And I certainly didn't deserve this, I said sharply, throwing photos of her meeting with Mark at the motel into her lap. At first, she looked at me in confusion at the change in my tone, and then she had difficulty understanding what I had given her. But when she focused on the frames and learned what they depicted, she began to wail, "Oh my God! No, no!" I handed her a copy of the divorce petition my lawyer had filed earlier that day. When she realized what I had given her, her breath caught. But I thought that you and I mean, isn't there any way? No, I interrupted her coldly, holding out another stack of papers. And in case you're wondering about Mark, here's a copy of the letter I sent to Bobby this evening, along with the detective's report. I also sent a similar letter to your sister Miriam, explaining why I was divorcing you. She groaned in pain and began to sob again. I just do not understand. You have been so loving and caring all these weeks. I can't believe you're so cruel right now. Doesn't all this mean anything? My dear, I said evenly, when you started your dirty little affair, you ended all my love for you. That's why I've spent the last few weeks trying to end your relationship with Mark. As for how I treated you, well, I wanted to make sure you understood how much you lost when you betrayed me. My goal was to take from you the same thing that you took from me, and as far as I can tell, my plan worked perfectly. Anne collapsed on the sofa, sobbing pitifully. Before leaving, I reached out and placed the book of Poe's stories I was reading on top of the other documents. The text was still open on the cask of Amontillado, and I used a highlighter to mark the passage containing the Montresor family motto for her to see, "No one dishonors me with impunity." Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.